Well, it does, but the commonalities of experiences tell us what the root thread is. You know, I would like to say that I invented this human change psychology, but literally I found this thread in 400 philosophies, every single movie, and then I started to now be able to see it in history where other people had skimmed over it. So if I just concluded from the history, unfortunately, well, I mean, what if the scientists simply studied your life and your life alone and said, this is a human life? Right? And if you're German, this is a human life for a German. This is how German people are supposed to be. They take your experience to judge. That's almost what science does. And how well are they doing at handling human beings? How are we doing in school? How are we doing nationwide?
Not good.
Right? How are we doing in Ferguson? Right?
Not good.
Right? We got some issues. So unfortunately, that's because they forgot that teachers are the best teachers, and they also let teachers be teachers without experience to confirm the teaching. If I go to college and then I go into business and I'm in business and I find out, I did this, oh, by the way, I did this. I went back to school after coming up with this psychology to get a degree in psychology, education, sociology. And I'm there in front of these professors who've got their PhDs in psychology, and they started to teach me Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Unfortunately, I'd already read Maslow. I didn't learn from my professor, my college. I actually learned Maslow, and I read Maslow, his The Farther Reaches of Human Nature. I read it 5 years after I'd gotten the first 10,000 homeless off the streets. So now I've got a teacher telling me what the experience was. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
But now I get into a school with a teacher that only taught. And he only taught what he picked up with no experience. To your point, you're right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And so what I'm finding out is he only got what he got in the last 20 years, which was it's a hierarchy of needs. But if you actually read Maslow, or you read it in the 50s, you'd find out that it's not a hierarchy of needs, meaning if you're hungry, you don't think about being safe. You won't think about social, you won't think about love, and you certainly won't think about your future or other things, because you just got to get food. Right? That's a hierarchy of needs, but that's not what Maslow wrote. Maslow wrote a hierarchy of needs and motivations. And without that other additional word that it was two things. It's very fancy term. That it's two things. Now if it's a hierarchy of needs and motivations, you don't start at the top, not the bottom. Animals start here. I'm not an animal. When I was a kid, I wasn't an animal. How many of you guys, when you were kids, went out to play all day and a parent or an adult had to call you in to eat? Right? You were having such a good time, you could care less about food, right? You just proved every psychologist in the world wrong, every psychology department, including Harvard, wrong by your experience. You're right. Because Maslow taught us that you start here. Who do you want to be? What character do you want to be? This kind of person thinks of people other than himself. Animals' first law is self-preservation.
The teacher's only as good as his experience.
Well, now look at, well, yes and no. I'm not going to make those conclusions again. Don't keep jumping to conclusions. So let's suppose we take a look at the Clark County School District, right? Where legitimately half the kids aren't graduating, dropping out, failing, or failing to finish or continue. And let's suppose also that most of those schools are now on free or reduced lunch and breakfast. Let me get this straight. You're following what you were taught in college, that if you don't feed them, they won't learn. And so you're feeding them more and more and more, and they're not learning, but you're stuck on your belief. Weird, huh? That's why you guys, hey, I'm going to tell you, you need a breakthrough, right? We need to be on top of this world because they've lost their minds. We've got to get it back, but if you can't get it back, sticking to the same kind of conclusion making that we did. No, are you kidding? If you're an entrepreneur, you don't go to work if you're full. Right? If your girlfriend keeps feeding you on that sofa, there's no reason, maybe give me the remote. There's no reason to leave. There's no reason to move. Right? That's understanding need and motivation. But boy, if we could press a button and get you back on your calling, right? What you must do, what you're called to do, what only you can do during this span of time we have on the planet, my God, that's self-actualization. That takes 30 minutes in the Hero School Saturday morning. All of you guys lit up. Right? Now you're on it. Now you have a reason. Okay, I'm gonna get this food thing out of the way, and I'm gonna get secure enough to get safe so I don't lose my ID anymore. Now you got a reason to get these things checked off so you can be on top of the world where you belong. And yes, my experience as an entrepreneur taught me that truth. But first, the teacher, or I'd probably give a different opinion every teacher. Then you confirm it with experience. If you guys are giving a speech, now how many guys are Larson students already? Larson students. And we're talking about getting a job. If you guys remember, there are 3 things that are important to confess or profess, whether it's on your application in an objective statement or in your pitch, in your interview. 3 things that must be there in order to get a job. We need to know about you. You need to know about the company. And then the last thing is, how will your abilities, skills, character, reliability, whatever, plus the company's ethic, culture, all that, how are you going to help them make more money or lose less money? Period. You make that pitch, you are hired. Okay? So just like experience and teacher, it's got to be about the teacher, what the model is, then the experience helps you confirm it. So now let's suppose you're giving the pitch. And let's suppose you're trying to get a job, but you haven't had one in a while. Let's suppose you never had one, but you're going to get your first job. Well done, by the way. But let's suppose you babysat. Let's suppose you helped your Girl Scout troop. Right? So here's what you're going to do. You're going to say, I am very responsible, right? You're talking about you. I know your company needs responsible employees. Now we need the experience. Now you need to say, for example, I have had 4 clients with children between the ages of 2 and 6 that I babysat for more than 2 years. And none of them died. right? But you see, now your experience supports your taught statement. Not with me. Are you understanding that? So you go by what you're taught first, support it with your experience. Again, I'm just convinced, because it was my whole life too, that we just make these conclusions and we tie them as if an experience is a single thing. And I'm going to say separate into 2 things at least. Right? Experiences. This is experience, data. Make it data. And then just take a look at multiple conclusions to that. For example, sir over here, are you still with us? Right? Are you still with us? Are you still black? Okay, great. All right. So sometimes we're going to judge you if you've had a lot of experiences because people are rude or stupid because you're black. You're going to want to be thinking, experiences taught me that kind of business doesn't want black people. But if you go back and say, well, you know what? And Chris Rock did a great little video on this on his HBO special. He says, maybe it was because I was always 10 minutes late. Do you see? Right? So there's this great little, do you see? But this is where we take ownership, right? I was late today. I made a decision. I'll take ownership for it. I apologize for being late. I took ownership because I decided to try to get a bunch of protein bars. Okay, I made a decision. You can fire me for it. Or you can be glad by my decision and it add value to the business, right? If you're late 10 minutes, don't say, oh, I'm sorry I was late. Is it late is the problem? It's late where it doesn't add value to the company. So again, break those things down. Break the data down, right? It could be you're right. Okay? So, do something different. Right? Become a hip-hop star. Right? Go where you're celebrated. This is something I read. A guy named Mike Murdoch. He's actually, I think he's the only white guy on BET. Mike Murdoch, I met him 15, maybe 20 years ago in Texas. When I was speaking in Texas, and back then I didn't know much, but people still hired me to speak. Mike Murdoch was the guy who made finer distinctions in everything he read and wrote, and he applied it to the real world. It wasn't just Bible or something like that. And remember, I wasn't raised religious. He said this. He made a list of, he said, it was like this list. I got a photocopy of it because he didn't, there's no original book or anything. But he said 30 things I would do differently if I was going to start my mission again. It was just 20 years. He'd already been, now he's spent 40 years probably in the ministry. Got a, he's a headliner on BET. But here's the deal. He said this, one thing. Remember this, everybody. Especially you if you're still black. Go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated.
That's right. Wow.
Just make a decision. Only go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. Right? If you go to somebody and says, you really think that's air you're breathing? Or you really don't want me here because I'm black, or I'm Hispanic, or I'm Scottish, or whatever, we didn't get to choose. Huh. Okay? But go where you have value and you can add value and make sure the money flows. Don't just go back to your family who'll take you regardless of your color. Okay?
Go to where you're celebrated, not where you're.
Tolerate.
Okay.
Yeah, so you make a decision. I only go where I'm celebrated, not where I'm tolerated. That's right. That's right. You guys have thrown stuff at me on Saturday. Guess what? I would not be seeing you today. All right, so I rambled again on a long answer, but I hope that was beneficial to some of you. Any